Good morning, church. I'm Pastor Daniel. If you're seeing this video this morning, it means that the weather has gotten bad enough that it's unsafe for us to gather and worship in person today. So know that as we encounter this message this morning, we hope you are staying warm, we hope that you are comfortable, and we hope that you're staying safe. Know that we wish we were able to be together this morning, but in some ways that this interruption came right now is really pretty fitting. It's a challenge that we face and something we persevere through. As many of you know, we have been grounding ourselves at the beginning of this new year in a series called Holy Discontent, where we've been looking at that inner restlessness that God stirs within us. Restlessness that says there's something in me, in our community, in our world that's just not right. And I'm being called to do something about it. We've grounded ourselves in the story of Nehemiah and seeing how that passion can be grounded in prayer, pushed toward purpose, and help us resist the real temptation that lives in our lives, in our world, to either become radically comfortable or profoundly outraged. Over these last couple of weeks, we've looked at what it means to allow prayer to shape our passion, to help us see that daily purpose and commit to that daily pursuit, knowing that we can't fix every problem that exists in our lives, in our community, in the world, in a snap of our fingers. But that if we follow faithfully day by day by day, we can be a part of God's impact in the world. Today, we ground ourselves in Nehemiah chapter 4. And in Nehemiah 4, the work has begun. The city is beginning to be restored. The walls are being rebuilt. But as soon as that work begins to happen, Nehemiah encounters resistance, threats, opposition, violence, fear. And in a moment, there's an opportunity for that to radically derail Nehemiah and what he does, but instead he returns to God in prayer and continues in perseverance. He allows that resistance to push him in such a way that he turns to God, he trusts in God, and he continues the work that he has and that God has placed before him. I think sometimes when we think that we're doing something God has called us to do, we are sometimes surprised that we encounter resistance, right? We serve a God that Scripture tells us can calm the storm with a single word. And yet how often in response to God's calling do we run into a storm? We do serve a God who can calm a storm in a single word, and yet we know that God does not calm every storm. When we think about moments of resistance where we are living in response to God's stirred discontent within us, we might wonder why we are encountering resistance, but often that resistance is there because what God has called us to disrupts the status quo. It can disrupt the status quo in our community, it disrupts the status quo in our world, and it disrupts the status quo even in us. Nehemiah's work in Jerusalem was disrupting what had come to be normal. Moses encountered this when he led the people out of slavery in Egypt toward freedom. He had a Back to Egypt committee, people who said, God, this is so hard that I'd rather live in slavery than live in freedom. Jesus encountered resistance too when he disrupted the status quo. Resistance in the form of opposition, in the form of folks teaching against him, in the form of even denial and betrayal. Human movements toward justice and the ushering in of God's preferred future have encountered it again and again and again. Even the nonviolent movement of racial justice that marked the 20th century, led by Martin Luther King Jr., encountered resistance, ultimately including his assassination. But this is not just something that happens in the big movements, the world-changing movements, the community-changing movements, the things that challenge the status quo of our culture and our community. but it also happens within us if we're real about things. We're standing here getting ready to worship in the last week of January. And yet, how often have we decided at the beginning of a new year, I'm going to be a different person this year. I'm going to pursue a new expression of myself. A restlessness has been stirred within me that I'm going to find an expression. I'm going to be better. Right? Our gyms are just as empty now as they were the last week of December, and it's not just because of the ice storm. It's because for many of us on that journey toward, I'm going to be in better shape, or I'm going to be more healthier, that disrupts our own personal status quo, and that challenge is hard to persevere through. If you've noticed over the last couple of weeks, we got a lot of alliteration going on, right? We allow our passion to push us to prayer that helps us find purpose, which we daily pursue. And today we're being invited to persevere in the face of struggle, in the face of conflict. Now, what does that resilience and perseverance look like? How do we cultivate it? How do we see it? I think we begin by returning to the prayer that grounded us to beginning. Stay connected to God in prayer. Also, remember that we don't go about this alone. We go in community. Thirdly, we return to what we talked about last week in our invitation to daily pursuit. We remember what is ours to do. And lastly, we recognize the reality that we trust that God is at work, even when things move more slowly than we wish they would. Stay grounded in prayer. Remember, we don't go this alone. Do what is yours to do each day. And remember that perseverance acknowledges that sometimes progress is slower than we want it to be, but God is still at work. Today, in many ways, is an embodiment of this call to perseverance. From a weather standpoint, this weekend has not been what we dreamed it might be. We had great plans for the weekend. Our church council was going to gather and discern and figure out what some good, important goals for the new year were going to be. We were going to gather and worship and celebrate and culminate this series well, and yet here we are. Encountering hopefully a good word to your soul in our homes. Praying that the power stays on and the warmth remains. And that soon the sun will come out. Temperatures will rise above freezing and the roads will be passable again. Friends, I know that this short homily is not a replacement for full worship, and I recognize that. But we also want to recognize that we're trying to keep our staff and our team safe in this same reality and dynamic that you are living in right now. And so I would encourage you to celebrate what we just talked about a minute ago, that we are not in this alone. Remember, as United Methodists, we're part of a worldwide connection of churches, and not all of them are stuck in the middle of an ice storm right now. So if you find your soul longing for a more full expression of worship today, go online. Hop on YouTube, here on YouTube, or search through Google for Church of the Resurrection in Kansas City. Powerful worship streamed every week. The Gathering in St. Louis, powerful worship streamed every week. Chapelwood down in Houston. Peachtree UMC out of Atlanta. Find one of those churches and lock in, experience the gift that it is to be a community that's a part of a worldwide community of faith where not everybody is locked in with ice this morning. Because in that small way, we are working the muscle that we're being invited to remember today. A muscle of perseverance. An essential part of channeling the holy discontent that God places on our heart. So no, my hope and my prayer is that we are back together right here in the sanctuary next Sunday for a full weekend of worship, both here in the sanctuary and in the chapel. And I hope and pray that you stay warm, you stay well, and that we're together again very soon.